Rich, you're on, brother.
We're ready.
No. No.
Right, let's do this. Welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today we have a lifelong martial artist who through his practice has met some incredible people and been on some incredible journeys. Today we're going to look into where it started, some of the life lessons learned, and more importantly, where is the destination? So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mikey Wright. Beside me, again, as always, we've got Pete Wakefield.
Hey, handsome.
So, Mikey, first of all, I always say this to people, especially when it comes to martial arts. As the main recording place to do this is in 360, and this is ultimately how our relationship started. So, first of all, what it's like for you to be back in the gym where we met?
It's odd to be back in an empty gym, isn't it? This is a sign
It's,
of the times. You know, we're
strange.
Martial arts instructors sitting in the middle of an empty gym with headphones on. I mean, you know,
It's a little bit like when the party's finished, everybody's gone home, but then them cold, hard, committed purists are still in there getting after it, sweeping up and doing the do's.
Now, speaking of which, you own a gym as well. You got a martial arts school. What's it been like with this lockdown?
Well, I think it's pretty much the same as everybody, really. We kind of preempted when they were actually going to shut it. I think the whole thing just came on pretty quick, really, didn't it? I mean, I tend to be a bit, what's the right term, ignorant to these things. You kind of, it's something happening in China. Oh, it's getting a bit closer, and then suddenly, wham.
Did you think it was actually going to happen, though?
No,
Because
I
I
didn't.
didn't.
No.
I thought it was all bullshit, to be honest.
Absolutely crazy. Because I try and stay away from the news all the time. Because I tell people that it's like pouring fucking negativity into your ears constantly. I don't need any of that. Yeah. And I always talk to people about controlling the controllables. You can't control the politics. You can't control the war that's going on. Doesn't mean you don't care. You really care about it, but you can't do anything about it. So stick to what you know. Because a lot of it doesn't come anywhere near you anyway. You might be concerned about the kids that are starving in Africa, and that's great, and you can give to charity, but you need to focus on you. So don't let it affect you every day. But something like this, like you've said, it just raced up. It came from something that was 1,000 miles away to it's here, it's on my doorstep, it's on me. Yeah. It's physically affecting me, it's closed me down, everyone around me, and then the anxiety and everything started to climb with people.
I think we just didn't have time to really, get our heads around what was going to happen. I don't think anybody did. We've never been here before. When we hear the word lockdown again, we'll be, we'll have something to refer back to. But it was like, oh, well, we're all teaching online for the next 12 weeks.
It's like when we speak to our grandparents and refer to the war years.
Yeah.
We're going to refer to the lockdown years,
well,
aren't we?
None of our kids have experienced this, none of our parents. This is the first time anybody has had to adapt so quickly to such an ever-changing world so rapidly as well.
Well, I think we got the better end of the deal than our grandparents, though, don't you? I'm like, I know it's tough to be at home, but let's put it into context. And I'm not saying that people haven't suffered, of course, like with the virus itself. I think for the people that are fortunate enough to have not been directly affected by it, be it personally and with their health, we've had to stay at home.
Yeah. And when you say that, when you start speaking to your kids in 20, 30 years, and you be saying, so you don't know you were born. When this lockdown was up, we could only talk to our friends through a computer.
Yeah. All we had was Netflix. All we had was food whenever we wanted it.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
We have a very, very warped perception of necessity.
Massively.
And living in a very affluent society, a lot of people moan about the UK and about the Western world and stuff like that. You're very, very lucky. I do gratitude exercises with all clients, and myself, I do it every single morning, because you don't realise how grateful you are for what you've got until you lose it. And I come across people who's come from a different background, come from a different country, from a different socio-economic level, and what they consider a privilege and what we consider a right. Like, I deserve this. I have the right to this. But you understand that not everybody has that opportunity. Same with my family and my kids. Some children that are born with deformities, cleft palates, stuff like that. You might moan about your kids, but when you appreciate how lucky you are that they're here and they're healthy and they're happy, a lot of people have got it a lot worse.
But we've all been forced into a period of introspection and all of that.
Love that, yeah.
And it's true. We talk about in Silat Fitra, we talk about contraction and expansion. I talk about that in my meditation classes. it's the universal law of nature. Everything contracts and expands. So whilst we're going through a period of contraction, how can we best use that? How can we use it as a way or as a time of looking at our lives, looking at what's important, looking at what's not, getting ourselves into habits, so it's been an important time for some of us, because it's given us time we would probably, some people have never had in their lifetime.
And it's awkward and uncomfortable for people as well. Hey, do some introspection, think about yourself. God, I don't want to think about my own stuff. God, it's so embarrassing. Can't we talk about the horrible politician? Can't we talk about the horrible thing that's going over there? Why don't we work on your thing? I know a lot of people that come and want to moan about celebrities, this, that, and the other, but they're not willing to work on their own finances, their own habit, their own physical conditioning, their own happiness, their own fulfillment, their own relationship with their children. My relationship with my children, I always thought it was great until I've experienced these past 12 weeks and how close we've become. Before, I was feeling a lot of guilt about how little time I gave them. And it's not all about quantity, it's about quality as well. Time that I've given them without distraction has been huge.
That's the key,
And in this day and age, it's all been choice as well.
Yeah.
You could say, but I have to work and I have to this. You don't. A lot of the things you've chosen to do, yes, we should all go out and earn a living and contribute to society, but you have a lot of choices you have actively chosen. And I had to say that to myself. I've actually chosen not to spend that time with my children, because I didn't have to do all those things. I was doing it to sustain a life that I thought I wanted, because I was chasing this fulfillment that was never actually going to come externally. Came from the introspection that, like you've spoken about. It's huge.
Now, Mike, you started just a minute ago. You started touching on some of your teachings and education within the martial arts. I know you've coached for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's only recently you decided to open your own school.
Yeah. Well, it started my teaching journey started, which was about 8 years after. No, about 6 years after I started back at martial arts at 16. So I started Impact Martial Arts, which is still going in Lutterworth.
With Christian Charlesworth.
Yeah,
I know him well, yeah.
So they've now got a centre like this, beautiful centre. But we started off in Lutterworth Sports Centre when the Sports Centre was just built. And then taught in various different kind of, not permanent locations. But recently, almost 12 months ago, so 12-month anniversary on the 1st of June.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it was my wedding anniversary. So I'll try and tie it all together so I don't forget. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah, smart move.
Yeah. It's
I've got all my family's birthdays tattooed on my arm. Just trying to forget them.
That's not a bad idea. I'll have to run with that. But yeah, so Movements, my studio, we opened 12 months ago. Yeah.
And what's your mission statement with Movements? Who's your target audience? What are you trying to pursue through that journey?
Movements really was it was through a process of introspection. It was like I'd taught under different guises. I'd taught different systems. I've been friends with you for long enough for you to know that. And Movements was like, right, if I'm going to do it now, I'm going to do it right.
Yeah. So is that name more of a statement as well?
It's kind of categorises what we do. So it's movements and the words underneath mind, body, spirit. But we kind of don't pay lip service to it. Everything has a reason in what we do. So from personal point, the martial arts that I do and I study now, I'm kind of inherently drawn to things with dynamic, fluid movement. And also in the martial arts, it's very easy to it's very easy. We make a profession of overcomplicating stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you, right, put your left leg forward and transfer your weight slowly, and you just baffle people and you go, it's just walking, isn't it? So we can complicate walking, so we can make everything else complicated. But for me, I've studied multiple systems, and they all come down to the fact they're just movement. I mean, dance is movement, but there's just a different intention with it. That's effectively what it is. We call it techniques. But if we start with techniques, and the lesson for me was with the Sistema, we didn't teach techniques. We only ever taught and studied principles. And what I found, it was an accelerated learning and teaching curve. So, movements, by categorizing things as techniques, yes, it can make it easier to teach, but we can all
that might become, would you say, almost restrictive, maybe?
Through technique?
Through technique, yeah.
Yeah, because we get hung up on the names of stuff then.
Yeah.
Instead of going, but what is it underneath? Well, it's a movement that adheres to certain principles, and we talked about, alignment with the body, intention, direction, sensitivity, all these things. And then at the end of it, you could call it a technique. And if you think about, if you look at something like Wing Chun, there's lots of techniques, but they're just expressions of principles, which are in turn movements.
Yeah.
So that was kind of part of the inspiration for movement. And if we look at, for me, martial arts these days, it's a personal development tool, and that's how I use it. And that's where I've grown to with it, with myself and with others. So moving, and if we look at health on a holistic basis, moving the body is important.
Mm-hmm.
But then if we look at the mind and the spirit's a bit, what is that?
Some people struggle with it,
Well, that's a subjective
thing. I think they struggle because they try to apply a universal definition to it, and it's not universal. It's a very personal thing.
Yeah, it's exactly
very
that.
Personal thing.
And if we look at, martial arts or how we use it, or just the interactions that we have within the studio or within our art and with our art, can help us move from a point of, unhealth to health. Unhappiness to happiness, from point A to point B in a physical altercation, so it can help us move from where we are and help us to provide us with a structured system to help us move to where we want to be. And that's, that's different for everybody that walks through the door.
I love the fact that when you said, because I hadn't heard the name of your place before, you just said it then. And I love most about that is it opens itself up to a much wider audience. I feel like, and I know very little about martial arts at all, but I feel like the Western world has gotten very focused on the violent aspect of martial arts because of the proliferation and the growth of things like the UFC, mixed martial arts, fighting in general, boxing. It creates an enormous revenue. Martial arts, if you did the word association game, martial arts is fighting, martial arts is punching, martial arts is kicking.
Yeah.
Whereas when you look back at some of its origins, and some of where the purists see the richness of that art form, fighting, the physical aspect of engaging with another individual, perhaps plays not very small, but plays a much smaller part, and is only one aspect of what is a much wider, much richer thing, which it sounds as though, if I'm hearing you correctly, you explore more aspects than simply that. One-to-one engage in fighting, because people, I imagine, come to you because they're not just looking to compete and do fighting and something like that. It's a whole holistic, as you rightly said yourself.
It is, and holistic is a word that I think is misunderstood and maybe misused, because often when we talk about something holistic, we talk about the yin.
Okay.
So if we look at holistic therapies or our perception of something that's holistic, generally it's about relaxation, it's about healing, it's about those things.
Yeah.
But for something to be holistic, we need to study both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So
yin and yang.
Yeah, it is, and again, it's that universal law. The more the more I kind of reflect on that, the more you realise.
How I see it, it's the good, it's the bad. It's also the good within the bad and the bad within the good, isn't it? If you see, what I'm saying there, and that is what martial arts is. But you go to a lot of martial arts schools, and they tend to only, I'm not saying all martial arts schools, but there's a lot, they just study or practice one element of that, don't they? They don't really go necessarily full circle and study the art.
Yeah, and that's that's not necessarily a bad thing, and everybody's well within their rights to do what they want, and often, and I think the other thing is, Rich, that it's not often taught, so people don't know it. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the thing. I have a good friend of mine. We have this conversation, and I think often it's not that people hold it back. I just think it's that people don't necessarily know.
No.
And unless you've got good teachers, or
because it gets diluted every time it gets passed down and passed through, and I imagine people that perhaps didn't see the sexiness or the profitable side of the holistic teaching will have then focused on that, and their students it just becomes more and more refined. When we talk about changing cultures can take generations. When we speak about, even from a fire service perspective, some of the attitudes and behaviours of people that we interact with can take years and years to change them, because if they don't get outside of their environment, if you attend Rich's school and this is where you learn all of your martial arts, you'll do it Rich's way. Yes. And then if you go on and do something else, you will actually be a purer, even more refined version of Rich's version, and you'll have sort of started to overlap your own intense focus on it, and it can become even more purer and perhaps even get further away from the wider approach to it. And they'll find people that have said they've done martial arts for 20 years that will have no idea what you're talking about and some of the other aspects of it.
Yeah, well, and the thing with my vision with it, and it's worked So far. If we have a studio to go back to, but if we don't, we'll start again. Yeah. We're built on good foundations. Was that, can we teach the principles of martial arts, albeit maybe through different systems, maybe through different arts? I mean, when you look at the core principles within holistic martial arts, I mean that to be, airy fairy and not addressing the conflict side or the self-defense side. I don't mean it in that way. We have students from ages of 5 to 85. They all do martial arts. Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah.
I don't water my martial arts down for my Tai Chi students. Not all my Tai Chi students are, older. Yeah. I've got people that are in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, and pretty much every age group going. But they all do martial arts. Yeah. They don't do different Tai Chi than what I do. They do the same thing.
Can you imagine that conversation down at the OEP meeting? What do you do? So I'm sat at home, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and then you got one person go, I'm doing martial arts.
Yeah, but that is what they're doing. We teach the same stuff to those guys. And you think, it's very easy to have these misconceptions in it. They don't want that. No. They love it.
I think it's easy as well. A great example, I've done it recently with my daughter. When you hear all the complex stuff that goes on in yoga, they have some wonderfully complex, we spoke about how complexity is sexy and it makes us feel like it's something really intricate that we need to learn. We've been doing a lot of kids yoga together as some of the homeschooling stuff that we've just found on YouTube. They don't use all the confusing names. They don't call it yoga. I know it's yoga because you look into it a little bit more. But my daughter absolutely loves it, and she loves contorting her body and trying to balance in this way and trying to balance in that way. And she's looking at it as play and fun, whereas some yoga teachers I've worked with before would never dream of having children in their class, and it very quickly can become this enormous spiritual thing. And even when you said earlier about using that word spiritual, that can put some people off immediately.
And it just points away from the truth.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? We're going to try and we're going to layer this thing. You go, anything that speaks in that kind of language, anything about being good at meditation or being spiritual, you're just moving away from it.
Meditation's a lovely word, because I say to people, I do sort of do meditation every day, and they're like, really? I didn't think you'd be flexible enough. And that's simple implication there when they go, wow, what do you think meditation is? Well, I've seen it, isn't it? It's where people, they do the cross-legged thing and they put their hands on their knees. I'm like, yes and no. Yeah. Meditation, like religion, it's a very personal thing to you. And it's also not necessarily about trying to empty your mind all the time. It's being still with thoughts, acknowledging them, and having a sense of balance and peace is what I define it as. And it gives me an enormous amount of richness and self-awareness, and also gratitude. It gives me an opportunity to realize the things that are around me. But if you say meditation, some people, you want to sit and meditate, they'd look at you like you've grown a third arm.
It's words again, isn't it?
It's words,
It's words. What does this word mean? And we get hung up on words, like very we get hung up on techniques. And
very emotive.
We get hung up on being serious and being adult-like, and you kind of go, nah. I get up some mornings at 6 o'clock and I go and meet my friend and we wave wooden swords around. Yeah. We were in our 30s and 40s, and you go, that's winning in life, mate. You know what I mean?
That is life.
You go, guys, you carry on being serious. We're winning here. Yeah. And that thing about play. When did we move away from play? Yeah. I learned to fight when I was 3 or 4 by playing.
We said this because it's the primitive part. Not like football, soccer, rugby, athletics, anything that I've done in the past. You put 2 kids together, one of the first things they're going to do is they'll grab hold of each other, they'll start rolling around, they'll start wrestling. It's in us. That movement and connection is viscerally part of who we are as animals.
And there you go, movement, connection. We talked about that before, probably before you press record. But that's what we go back to. We go full circle. And if we're not careful, we take people on a massively long journey to come back to something that they already knew. And people already inherently know how to move because they moved like it as children. When I teach my adult class, in my martial arts class, and you teach people to fall and teach them to roll. And then I have the kids in before, and you go, I just spend my entire life trying to teach adults to move like kids. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? To get rid, and you go, what is it that's what? Part of it's physical because we hold a lot of tension in our bodies, particularly in modern world because of our sedentary habits. Yeah. But when it comes to even the striking and stuff, you go, it's taken away. Yeah. Like, all the martial arts I do now, or my focus on training, is not adding. It's taken away. Yeah. Getting layers of psychological tension.
You're trying to disassemble that person to be able to rebuild them, to be able to connect better with the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Mark, you're quite a popular name in the world of martial arts, and we're going to get on to where that has led you and the journey it's took you on. But for those who may not necessarily know you, when did this all start? When did your martial arts journey begin?
So I started when I was 4, and I remember sitting watching the judo class, back in the day.
50 years ago.
Yeah. I know what you're thinking. Looking well for it, aren't I? It's this lockdown, Pete.
Yeah.
I started at 4 sitting on the bench, and my mum took me to watch a judo class over the road, and then I started at 5, and then I did judo till I was 10, and then I took a break. I think it was, back in the day, it was wrestling came popular, and I think it was
WWF, wasn't it?
Yeah, WWF, and it kind of that crept onto the mat.
Steve Austin, all those names. Yeah,
somebody was a bit over enthusiastic with his clothesline or something, and it put me off. I was only 10. I was always quite a gentle soul. I think I still am. I think. And then I started back. It really kind of got going again when I was 16.
That's a big gap.
You had a big kickboxing journey, I believe, weren't you? Did you get some more kickboxing? Yeah,
so I started in kickboxing in Hinckley with Sensei Cole Stevens at Maverick Freestyle. That was back in the day when kickboxing was the thing.
It was pretty cool. It was cool.
It was MMA didn't exist. I started cross training at the very afterwards with Wayne Lakin in Hinckley, but kickboxing was. Yeah, it was that, and the kickboxing circuit. It was semi-contact kickboxing, karate. Did
you do much of that? The point spar and the light continuous. I loved it. The circuit at that time, up and down the UK, there was competitions every Sunday, wasn't there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's very hard to find a competition now, really, compared to what we was doing back then. But I remember. Every Sunday there will be, Sheffield, Lincoln.
Yeah, that's what we
always
used to
the
do.
same circle, but
Boston,
amazing. Boston series.
Yeah, Boston.
I remember that.
So
that's where I remember when we were speaking a minute ago about martial arts feeling punch, kick, violent.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because that's what I sort of grew up around, and I never did any of that. I was out there playing rugby and ice hockey and roller hockey and all that sort of stuff, because I thought all kind of martial arts was kicking and punching people in the face. And that wasn't where I wanted to do. I wanted to push my body in a different way. So when did you start to learn more about the other elements of it? Because you were still very young then, so I suppose it was sexy and interesting to do more kicking and punching.
Yeah, and I think it's, these kind of things are a bit of a natural progression. You kind of just grow up. I don't mean that people do that aren't grown up. But I think for me, we go through these kind of stages in our life. I was always very inquisitive as to the internal aspects of the art. So, back in the day, I mean, the internet is good in some ways, but we used to have magazines, man.
Yeah,
I used to love a magazine, when you used to look, it's a bit like on the telly when, like Cracker was on Channel 3 or whatever. You had to wait every week for it to come back,
Combat magazine, Martial Arts Illustrated.
Yeah, exactly, and they were good, and you used to get really excited about, like, buying something you didn't need every month when it came out, like a pair of new gloves or nunchucks. We did.
But the simple act of sitting and reading it forced you to concentrate, whereas now we're information fast food junkies, aren't we? It needs to be a 7-second interesting clip that excites me. Hold my attention on board now.
Yeah, but that's the problem with the way that I think we look at. I mean, that's reflective on all aspects of our lives, and the way that our behaviours changed in the way that we look at things. Yeah. And I think it's shifted onto the way that we look at martial arts. Back in the day, you would have somebody reading. Writing. The interview, it was articulate. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And you got to know about people. You got to know about arts, and it taught us to have that level of attention.
Whereas I feel now we want instant gratification. I've come to the first class. When can I fight someone? When can I punch in the face? Now, what I want to learn is, because you've only shown me 2 or 3 minutes of movement patterns there, and not only physically nearly knocked me over, but mentally bowled me over in your ability to produce. I'm probably 6, 7. I don't know. I'm heavier than you, but the power that you produce through the connection and understanding with your body, whereas. When somebody first starts martial arts, they're not interested in the sexy side that will produce the long-term result. We're trained on short-term results. Yeah. Show me how to punch. And then for me, thinking in a simplistic muscle-building way, I'd have just gone, right, I know how to punch now. Now I just need really big muscles and I can punch a lot harder. And that was never going to get me the result I wanted.
And I think it's a bit of it's both sides of the coin. I mean, when somebody comes in, or if we're going to teach somebody to defend themselves very quickly, then we have to start with that external stuff.
Yeah,
I think for me as well, when you've gone through, enough training that your body hurts, that you've had tendinitis in most of your joints, and you realise, you come to that realisation that, I'm wearing myself out here. I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, and my body's already telling me that what I'm doing is
I'm there right now. I'm beating it to hell.
And we just look at different ways to do stuff.
Yeah.
And go, how can I improve what I'm doing? I mean, that's the essence underneath martial arts, isn't it? Otherwise, we'd all just be getting big.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that size doesn't work. Doesn't mean
it's so true. I train smarter now. I don't train any harder. People say, you must train harder to do this without all the drugs. And just train smarter. I don't lift heavier weights. It's just working smarter, understanding my body more, listening to it, resting it when it needs it, and learning the why behind the method. So not just going in, picking something up and doing it for whatever, but knowing the why behind it. And as you've said there, if you understand what you're trying to achieve as an end result, you're more interested in the pathway.
And I think you need somebody to point that out, and it's not to be critical of anybody. I've been very fortunate in the teachers that I've had along the way. I'm very grateful for the teachers that I've had.
I'm looking forward to talking about some of them a little bit later, because some of them, I've met a few of them, and some of them I haven't had a chance to meet, so we'll speak about that. I'm looking forward to speaking to you about that in a second. But Powercube, talk to me. A lot of people are going to be listening to this.
Yeah.
And they won't have a clue what it is. So before we get into, the incredible people you've met and the places you've been, first of all, for the people listening, what is the Powercube?
So the Powercube is the world's only measurement system for combat sports and martial arts with regards to striking power. So we simultaneously measure the two characteristics of a human impact, and a human impact being different to an inanimate object, without going into too much science. One, because I'm not clever enough, and two, it isn't all that interesting. But the way that human beings generate power, there are two measurable components. The first one is impact power, which is the initial impact. It's an incredibly small time frame. But the other is kinetic energy, which is the penetrative and destructive characteristic in a strike. So, we've done something, or the Powercube does something that nobody else has ever been able to do, which is to accurately measure.
So that's what it is. But what's the purpose of it then? Why do we need to measure it? Why do we need to understand how we generate this power?
So the first thing, when it comes to measurement, it allows us, because it can become a bit of a macho competition, and
absolutely,
who can punch the hardest.
Yeah.
And
we've all seen it at the circus, haven't we? We've all seen it at the fair. Let's all punch it really hard.
When I first had a go on it, rightfully so, we was all in there and we were just, who could hit the hardest? We loved it, absolutely loved it. But then we started changing different techniques, different movement, and not necessarily hitting it as hard as we could, but we were getting high scores.
It's rarely ever the biggest guy that wins, isn't it?
Interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting.
And I suppose if I was to sum it up, it's the most professional coach you're going to come across, because
it ain't going
to flatter you. It ain't going to rub your shoulders and say, Rich, that was great. It's going to tell you how it is. Now, how many people, can we put our hand on our heart and go, I'm prepared for that in a room of people of 30 of my peers? Do you know what I mean? I'm just going to, this is going to, hi, this is my Mikey, this is the Powercube. Just before you start going, this cube is going to point out every insecurity you've ever had, in front of all your mates. Yeah. But essentially what it does is it allows you to analyse your striking technique. Yeah. So you can make incremental increases. So we talked earlier, the first thing that, because measurement is new in the martial arts, in the combat sports, and when you're a strength and conditioning guy, the things that the reasons behind why we do certain things, the way we generate movement through the hips, the way that we breathe, is to generate power.
Yeah.
But we've never been able to, go into do these layers work, and how we coordinate them, etc. So, other than you get it out your system and everybody runs it and tries to hit it as hard as you can, because that's the world.
That's our nature.
Because it's our nature.
10-foot run up.
It enables you to, accelerate your technical ability and to become more efficient. And when it comes to working towards generating peak or optimum striking power, you've got to establish consistency first. I've got to be able, and ultimately, again, you go, there's a reflection of us in our skill in martial arts.
Yeah.
We want to be, it's like, so that is almost personified skill. We want to be able to produce reproducible results consistently, time and time again.
Yeah.
So
on demand.
Exactly.
There's no point having that lightning flash once in a blue moon, because if you're going to use it as a tool in your tool set to make you a better martial art, you need to be able to produce that on demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Not randomly after 23 hits. Oh God, I finally got a good one. Wow, my wrist hurts.
Yeah.
No, that was blind luck.
And the thing is, as
well, do it again.
It's a foot square with a target in the middle that's white with a cross. Now, we should be able. We're martial artists, right? You should be able to hit that thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? We should. You know what I mean?
People aren't, though, are they?
No, but the reason is because we go away from the way that we train.
Yes.
You know, and this is what my job, really, our job is to educate the world when it comes to that. It's like, don't do something different because there's something in front of you that can measure. You know, I've trained guys myself for 10 years. You get the Powercube out, they turn into lunatics. Yeah. I'm going, no.
Trying to produce maximum force with all the wrong fundamentals. It's
fine with somebody else's students, but like having a word in there going, hey, listen, I know what I'd like you to do. Do what you've been training to do. So it allows us to measure what we've been training to do. It allows us to identify our strengths and weaknesses, but it allows us to profile. I mean, whether you're a combat athlete, amateur, semi-professional, professional, a self-defense practitioner, you know, being able to produce those consistent results in self-defense is like hugely important.
Do you know what I love about that is something that when you spoke about doing one thing in isolation, I used to, when I speak to some of my clients about kinetic chain and performing a movement and how automatic it becomes and then subconscious it becomes. But when you drag it into the forefront of the mind, and we talk about like using a standard punch or something like that, when you've done something 1,000 times, it becomes automated. Yeah, you've got that movement pattern in the body, knows how to produce its force. And you've said rightly, you've seen what your clients usually do, what your members usually do. Yeah. But when you try and look at that thing in isolation, and I like using driving as an example, you and I could get in the car now, you could put the CD player on, you could have a chat, you could look out the window, you could comment on something, you might even be on the phone. Hopefully you wouldn't be, but maybe you would be. And you could do all those things, and car would just be automatic. Yeah, the mind would just be doing it. But if we ask you to do that in a driving test and de-chunk it, you then start thinking about, I've got pedals, I've got mirrors, I've got steering, I've got gears. There's like 7 things because you're trying to de-chunk it. Whereas when it becomes automated and you allow it to drop into the subconscious, it becomes nice and fluid. Have you found, because I was hearing you then when you were speaking about some of the people that usually do it normally, if you then try and measure that thing in isolation, go right now, hit as hard as you can, they're de-chunking everything they'd usually do normally. Yeah. They're trying to focus on the wrong things to produce maximum power, and they've lost the structure that was around it.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah. You know, it's like, we train to punch hard all the time, and then it's like when you're given the ability to measure it, it's like, right now I'm going to do it different. And it is exactly that. When you start getting people, it's a great psychology test, the Powercube. Right?
Yeah, it's changing their way of thinking.
But it changes the way of doing stuff, because people start sweating before they got on the pad. The trousers come up, the sleeves come back, the hat's backwards. You go, gosh.
Marky, I did when it was down here. When the lads have only been here a few months, smashing it and getting high scores, and then I'm supposed to be going, I've been doing martial arts 25 years. I'm thinking, I best get a fucking high score. They're paying me to teach them martial art. I'm thinking, best get a fucking high score.
And this is the thing, it's a great ego killer. It's not designed to be that, but it is that thing,
It's only an ego killer if you can't take it. If you're not comfortable enough in your own ability, you should. If it is an ego killer, you should be excited about it, because you're like, thank God it's exposing an area of improvement for me. If you think you're the best puncher in the world and it just says you got a great score, you haven't learnt anything.
No,
it's reaffirmed it, but
we can take a professional sometimes 50% increase.
And you do work with professionals.
Yeah. I mean, you take. Because I come from a multiple style background, I've travelled around the world. I've been punched to high heaven with that kit. I know the principles that are universal that will affect and generate and improve and increase power. Isolating 10 core principles, starting with joint alignment at the end, and work through what are the big key ones first, the way that people align their joints when they strike. So it doesn't matter whether they're a professional athlete or a guy off the street. We would apply the same principles with them. Breathing, tension, all of these, the big ones really, and physical tension, psychological tension. It's an interesting.
Can I ask you a really idiot it is a martial arts question, but it's for all the people that are listening that are not martial artists.
Here we go.
I'm going to go, because I'm hearing that, I'm like, producing power, short distance, not running up. And on my head, in the world of people that know only a few martial arts people, goes to Bruce Lee. Yeah. And I think, and I never really looked into it, but the 1-inch punch. Yeah. So obviously he ain't moving a lot for something like that. But I'm assuming, because you're spelling out joint alignment, because when you see the old videos of him doing it, he does almost like a couple of warm up or false movements
Yeah.
or whatever first, and the enormous amount of power. He's not a big guy
Yeah.
that you could produce through that. Is that an example of it, or is that something different? Am I off on a tangent there?
No, I mean, if we look at the two measurables of human impacts, the first one's impact power, that's speed dependent. So the faster the strike, the bigger that initial impact. And a great way to explain this is think about two cars going head on, and the impact is that initial bang.
Yeah.
The bigger the cars, the bigger the impact, but also then the kinetic energy. So the impact speed related to that initial part of the strike, the kinetic energy is the penetrative characteristic. So when you do those two things well, and you coordinate the peak of each of those, this is the trick.
Yeah.
You coordinate the peak of both of those. That's when you get maximum power. And he generated speed from a very short distance.
Yeah.
But he also
you did when we were just doing a warm up before
magic
this
formula.
And I was expecting you to do something on a pad and take like a couple of steps back. I said, because I've seen people jab and stuff like it's a distance tester. You were jabbing me at a knockout, pace. I've had the good and bad fortune.
I'm just sliding a tenner under the table here to Peters.
I had the good and bad fortune of with Rich and the Olympians and stuff that we've had in here. I've been hit rightly or wrongly by a few random people in the past few months. But the amount of force you produced in a very short, I wasn't even ready for it. I was expecting you nowhere near that. It really, really took me by surprise.
Mikey, when you was upstairs, he was about in tears.
I did. Rich had to convince me to stay. I said, can I just go and sit in the car because I'm feeling a little bit. I was in the fetal position. He had to sort of rub my back and convince me to sit back up.
I'm glad you did anyway.
Like earlier, Mike, you mentioned through the Powercube, you've profiled some athletes.
Yeah.
And through this, you've had some massive names, haven't you? I mean, you've had Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
You've had some big names like
Conor McGregor.
I wasn't there for that, but yeah.
You've had Joe Rogan's used it. You've had
hasn't he got the record for a leg kick on it or something like that?
I
heard on one of his podcasts he was talking about.
Yeah, he had it for a bit. And to be fair, Joe's not a big guy.
No.
If you look at,
he's amazing at taekwondo, though, isn't he?
Yeah,
a lot of people don't realise his kicks are phenomenal.
He's got fantastic kicks and those tight kicks. So, but no, he's cool.
Yeah. What was you saying now? You've got off subject here, boys.
Sorry, you were saying Conor McGregor, and you were saying some of the people he's worked with.
I'm just saying you've gone on this incredible journey. And you've ended up in some amazing places.
Yeah.
But this Powercube, it was a business journey, and it couldn't have been easy starting this. So talk to me about the beginnings. How did you build your way up and end up in those places? Was it a lot of knocking on doors, or? Yeah,
so the Powercube journey started. So 12 years ago, the inventor Kevin Franklin. Now, for anybody's listening, right, and I know there's some motivational aspects. It might be the only motivational thing I say all day, but Kevin Franklin was 58 when he started this. From an idea, 58, and he used his pension to fund it.
Yeah.
He's 70 now, and we're 12 years in. But he was, I talk to people and say, I'm too old to start this. I'm like, dude, you're 33.
Yeah.
Here's a 58-year-old who, more than anything, had managed to convince his wife that it was a good idea to put his money into a thing that measures striking power. So his initial frustration is he's a karate guy. Was why? Like an almost absurdity that he couldn't measure a punch and he couldn't track his progress and the development of his striking. So that's when it started 12 years ago. I met Kevin at the Seni 2012. And Seni was Seni, the martial arts expos, when we used to get excited as martial artists for these expos, when you couldn't buy nothing online. It was like you'd go down and get just stuff you didn't need. And that was great. But they were great though. I think it was the last proper Seni. So I was down there with Anthony Pillage, helping him, God rest his soul, on his stand. So as you can imagine, it was a eventful and colourful weekend. It was actually a weekend that changed the direction of my life because it was the same weekend I met Andy Norman.
Yes.
So really, I was thinking of driving up on the way here, and I think about it periodically. I think, two things that had a very big impact on my life over the following years, and I met them both at the show. So Kevin was there with a very early development model of the Powercube called the Strike Mate.
Was this like a prototype then?
This was a prototype. Kind of the same stuff that I brought to you years ago.
Yeah.
So he was there with his, industrial old metal stand and his development software. And we were having a walk around, a couple of us, and I saw some guys doing a taekwondo back fist, and I was heavily into my system at the time. And I could give that a bash. So anyway, long story short, I hit it with one of the back fists, and he was like, "Oh, nobody's ever hit it like that before. What do you do?" We got chatting, we exchanged numbers, and I remember it was kind of from this point on that I remember ringing him up, and I came home, and it sat in my head, and I was like, "I get it." And I rang him up, and I said, "Hello, Kevin, it's Mikey, right? I met you with the thing." "Hello, Mikey, how you doing?" And I just said, "I get it." And he went, "What, you get it?" And I said, No, I get it." He said, "You get it." And then we spent an hour on the phone. And ironically, the stuff we were talking about then was UFC and, gyms, commercial gyms. And the stuff we've been talking about for the last 8 years is the things that we're doing today and the places that we've taken it to. So that was where it started, really. And then, I just helped them with some of the development. I was just an early enthusiast, I suppose. And then he gave me a piece of kit, and I used to go and do early seminars, very early seminars.
Almost demoing the kit, really, weren't you? Just trying to get it out there.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. Nobody knew. I mean, we still kind of, it's sad in one respect that, we've come a million miles, but we're still kind of doing the same thing. Not doing the same thing. I mean, I was walking around with, it was the Stripe, mate, with either really crude metal work and just doing kind of low-key seminars and events and having a lot of fun along the way. And then I'm trying to think when really I became much more heavily involved in it. I mean, we did the kind of a few boxing seminars, boxing gyms. I came to you guys, I think that was a bit later on. And then I came more hands-on. I was just, kind of spending more and more time, with on the product and with those guys. And then I started the kind of coaching side. So Strike Coach, which was my business, was really just kind of, well, we've got the Strike, mate, but, to bring it to life, it needs people. It needs that explanation. It needs
something building around it.
Yeah. And
because on its own, people may see it as a bit of a gimmick or something like that. But when you reinforce it with the principles of what it can deliver for you as an athlete, rather than just a toy for you to play with, how can it help you develop as an athlete? But I did just want to capture... When you drove to that, event, you drove to that experience, you never envisaged meeting somebody that you would have so much involvement with, and there'll be a lot of people that don't appreciate who they're going to meet every single day. Yeah. And nobody gave you anything then. Nobody reached out and gave you an opportunity. It was only through your openness and your confidence to reach out to that individual that's led you down this incredible path that's taking you all over the world. Yeah. And the bit I love about that is, you never know who you're going to meet every single day, Yeah. Always deliver the best version of yourself and be curious in other people, because that's where the richness of anything is. It lies within the people. Again, it wasn't the system, because I'm sure other people had the thought before, but it was down to him that took action on it, and it was down to you that invested that interest and curiosity in it as well.
Yeah, and the biggest things that have taken me in the direction of my, what I say now is my adult life is my... later adult life. I'd say later, I'm 37 now, but say the last 10 years, really.
Richard just turned 40.
He always gets that in every single time.
He looks good for it, though.
31.
All of those things have come through, going somewhere not knowing you're going to meet someone and introducing yourself or something like that with no expectation.
I think it's that bit. Some people won't go somewhere unless they're guaranteed something. What am I going to get paid? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way.
And it's not the way to build relationships.
No.
I think that's the thing, whether it's business, whether it's friendships, I think there's a lot of, there's one word, two words that don't resonate with me. One's networking and two's entrepreneur. Yeah. Because I think there's a falsity for me in both of those words. Networking alludes to me going with the intention of meeting someone to get something out of them. I mean, it's a bit like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but it is. I mean, LinkedIn is the social online social version of that, and I find that very uncomfortable because it's never worked with me. No. And the relationships that I've developed, and I'm not saying, hey, look at but I just know from my personal experience that the ones that have borne fruit have always just been the honest two-way relationships, and that comes from my teachers.
It's like you're trying to put force structure into something that is inherently natural. Creating relationships with people should be a natural thing, and it's never born off one thing. So if you go to a network event, it's very, very rare, I believe, and I agree with you, that you're going to build something long-lasting off that one event. Because somebody might say to you, how did you develop a great relationship with him? Yeah. Well, was it the first time I met him? Was it the phone call? Was it the second phone call? Was it when I travelled up and met him for 20 minutes? Was it when he sent me that PDF, or we had exchanged 3 emails? Which one was it? It wasn't any of them, and it was all of them at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't one day.
You know,
it's
like,
all of it.
You know, hi, my name's Mikey. Well, what can I get from you? And I just find the whole thing really uncomfortable. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just for me, you know. And the same thing, I think, with that word entrepreneur. You know, I don't even class myself as a business person as such. You know, we just do stuff and get stuff done. And the way I've got the best things done, and I say best things, they're just cool. You know, they're not necessarily any better than anything else. They're just cool. The reason I've travelled the world is just because I've just spoken to people. I've been nice and not said, hey, I want to come over and get in your gym. Just
I bet it's never felt like work either, has it? Because you can see just through the way you're talking, you enjoy it, don't you? You enjoy this a lot.
I'm at a point in my life now where if I don't enjoy it, I don't do it. And that's the same thing with the Powercube. If we're going to do this, we put too much time. Kevin, you're 70. If we're going to do this, we're going to have fun with it. You know, and we have got a great product. But I'll tell you a story of two things when it was work. The first one was the Body Power Show. This is quite funny. These are things I just really wouldn't necessarily want to do again.
Come on, we're all ears. But we're all ears for this one.
So the Body Power Show, you know, BSN, the protein
BSN
company,
Nutrition.
That's it. So we got contacted by them to do a corporate activation at the Body Power Show. I think it was 2000 and I'm trying to think when it was. It was like 16.
You know, even when
like
people
that.
use words like that, if someone said, "Come and do a corporate activation," what does that mean?
Oh,
For
no.
God's sake, why have you called it that?
Yeah.
A corporate activation.
Not usually this, anyway. But it was a beat Conor McGregor challenge, right? So we had to stand. Now the BSN stand, if you ever go to these events, I mean, these events are massive.
Oh yeah, I've been Body Power. Times. It's crazy.
Huge. Yeah. And BSN just give away free stuff. So their stand is chocker. It's huge and it's chocker, and there's a queue around it from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. Yeah. So we had to handhold the Powercube from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock for 3 days on the bounce, and there was a 2-hour queue around that stand the entire time. So
full of, and I'll say this from my opinion, because I'm going to Body Powder, all the people in the queue, or a lot of people in the queue, will have been chemically enhanced individuals who have got something to prove to the 7 lads standing next to them or the very attractive lady.
There was some pretty.
So what you're getting at now, Mike? You're saying you had to hold the pad
for
the whole day while everyone was just smashing it to bits.
3 days. I said to my mate Carl, Jaff, I said to him, Jaff, what are you doing next weekend? We're both martial arts instructors. We travel the same journey. He's one of my best friends. He's my kung fu brother. You know, we travel to Kent and do our Tai Chi. We do our Silat together. He's just one of life's beautiful human beings, and we've had some fun along the way. So I said to him, what are you doing next weekend? He says, oh, nothing, brother. Why? I said, I don't fancy earning a few quid coming and giving me handy. I said, what for? I said, well, we've just got to go and do this Body Power Show at the thingy. Yeah, that's all right. 3,000 strikes we took over 3 days.
You've just given me about 10, and I'd had enough by then. I wanted to get you talking, sat down and talking, so you stop hitting me. Yeah. And I had pads, you know. I can't imagine doing 3,000.
So yeah, that felt like work then.
That was definitely work. And then we did the Arnold Classic for BSN again. We did the Arnold Classic in Barcelona. 4,000 strikes, man. I mean, some of the biggest
from some colossal individuals.
You know, some of the biggest bodybuilders and powerlifters in Europe, and people say, but they can't punch.
Let me tell you.
It's still enormous, and they still produce a lot of power.
We practically had whiplash by the end of the weekend, and I mean these guys, right? So the thing with the Powercube is people tend to forget that you're holding it. All right. So we've got a guy who's the size of a 3-bedroom semi who thinks it's appropriate to run at it, and I'm going, hey, excuse me, mate, what, you can't run at it in Spanish, you know? It's like, and people just kind of just lose their minds. I mean, you see it, people lose their minds.
Did anybody ever miss it and hit you?
Oh, we got punched in the throat, we got punched in the groin. I mean, you know, and then one of you is older, you kind of go,
I can't help it. Like, there's something funny about somebody getting hit, isn't there?
Oh, it's great. Especially when they don't think it's coming.
But it was 4,000 strikes we took over that weekend. And you know, you're out in Barcelona, we're on a bit of a jolly, you know, we've been beaten up for like 11 hours pretty much. So you go and have a couple of, you know, medicinal pints afterwards, don't you?
Absolutely.
And then you roll over at 8 o'clock in the morning and you just look across and you go,
we've got to do it again.
You know, and on the third day, I mean, you know, that was getting up, that was tough. But we got
your shoulders and your elbows
we were just
brutal.
Beaten up. In the end, we just pulled the plug out and said, "That's it, we're going home."
Did you?
Yeah, we couldn't do anymore. I mean, the thing is as well, when they stopped giving free stuff away, that queue just went to us.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, and there wasn't it was just one after another for like 9 till 6 every single day. Brutal. But anyway, you know, but we had a bit of fun.
Now we're going to change subjects a little bit now. Mainstream martial arts, your karate, your kickboxing, Thai boxing, MMA, there's loads, but if you refer to any of them, the general public, you know, they know what it is. If you're boxing, you're punching. If you're kickboxing, you're kicking.
Yeah.
you do martial arts, which I don't think many people know about, and that's Silat.
Silat.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that. First of all, what is it? Where does it come from?
So Silat is a collective name for a lot of Southeast Asian martial arts. So I'm very fortunate in that I train. I started my training with a very close friend of mine, Guru Eddie Quinn. So I started,
The approach.
Yeah, Eddie Quinn, the approach.
Yeah.
So I trained privately with Eddie in Silat Fitra, and then a couple of years ago I was out over filming with Eddie for one of his Silat online courses, and he knelt me down and said, Guru to a Chris has said that there's an opportunity for you to train with him if you want, and you have my blessing, because it's not something I would have done, or necessarily deemed appropriate, and I wouldn't have asked. I would never have asked. I used to go and visit Guru Chris, but we would talk about meditation for hours at a time. A remarkable man, and then so that's when my Silat Fitra journey started with Guru to a Chris at his home in Nottingham. Silat Fitra is a Malaysian martial art. So it's a Malaysian style of Silat, and it's the Malaysian art of natural self-defense.
And there's a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, there's quite a lot of ground fighting in that as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So part of the and ground fighting, and it's different to ground fighting in what we would like a modern, when I say modern terminology, grappling, jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, wrestling. Yeah. So it's one of the key things with Silat is it's a bladed system. As a lot of the Southeast Asian arts, it's a cultural thing. It's a bladed system.
Okay.
But it was interesting. We were talking. I interviewed Guru to Chris during the lockdown. We were talking about ground fighting, and he said we're always ground fighting. It might have been Guru Eddie. He said, but sometimes we've got 2 feet on the ground, and sometimes we've got more of us on the ground. So it's a really interesting concept, and kind of talking about, again, that association with words. And you go, ground fighting is this, and you go, well, we as long as we're alive, we're fortunate. If the ground ain't beneath our feet, we got to worry. You know what I mean? So ground fighting, but looking at striking from the ground, and not engaging in what you would generally call like grappling and getting close in that respect, largely because when you've got the constant, this isn't to diminish or to be critical of grappling in any sense, by the way, just to talk about the Silat element of ground fighting. So we learn to strike from the floor, we learn ground forms, so we learn to move. The ground offers us a great opportunity for feedback. It's a great friend, because it tells us, and if you're working on a hard floor, it will point out your
I've watched quite a few videos of this art, and it's very interesting how they move on the floor, because there's a few spins on the knees as well, isn't it? How you move in with your elbows and your knees as well. Mike, how long have you been studying it for now?
Silat Fitra, I'm trying to think when I met Guru Eddie. I met Guru Eddie at an awards, probably 5 or 6 years, and more regularly in my private. So I train privately with Guru to a Chris at his home. Obviously not at the moment because of the lockdown. Every week, so I tend to spend between kind of 2 and 4 hours a week
with my martial arts. I like to take the best of everything. I mean, a lot of people just stick to one art, don't they? But I like to try everything. That's what when I came to you and you introduced me to Systema at the time. Again, brand new for me, blew my mind. I'm like, wow, bring a bit of that back. How does training in Silat compare to other martial arts you've practiced?
I think I'm very fortunate with the teachers that I have. I mean, my training is. And since I started training with my Tai Chi privately with Steve Rowe and training privately with Guru Eddie and Guru Tua Chris, I've been spoiled, I suppose. It kind of points to the underlying principles that are really there within all arts, whether they're termed differently, whether there's cultural interpretation. So, Silat Fitra predominantly is a training on your own. Which is for me is good because I train at unsociable hours mostly, and I teach, and I tend to train very early in the morning or very late at night. But it teaches me how to move my body better, and that's really underpinning what it's all about.
You know what, you've said a few times now, and I'm going to sort of catch you and try and tell you off a little bit for this, because you've said a lot about how lucky you are and you've been blessed to work with these people, but in amongst a lot of what you've said, there's been elements of where, like when you said about you'd sit and discuss meditation for a few hours with one of your teachers. That requires a lot of patience, a lot of desire for a deeper understanding. And I feel as though you would never have gotten these opportunities had you not demonstrated a massive respect and personal investment in the martial arts in such a deep way. We spoke earlier about transactional and how people want to come and do the fun, sexy thing for an hour and then they want to go and do something else. And they perhaps want to aspire to develop the depth of knowledge that you have, but they'll never find themselves in those positions to get that opportunity, the opportunities that you claim you've had luckily, but they would never have come had you not have already invested. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit like, is the chicken and egg, which one comes first? Some people might say, oh no, if I had those teachers, I'd be really interested. I'd spend loads of time. Yeah, but you're never going to get those teachers unless they identify in you the real long-term commitment and the depth of saying, today we're going to sit and discuss meditation for a few hours. People will go, I actually want to work on my striking, so I probably won't bother going to that one. Yeah, if you don't go to that one, you're never going to work your way through these crucial steps because they know you've not invested in that level. You're really deeply invested in this.
And I mean, you know, I'm fortunate that my teachers, I suppose, agree to teach me because I train with people that you can't approach. You know, like certainly Guru Chakras you can't approach.
But that's what I mean, though. It's not lucky. You can't approach them. They only approach you because they recognize something within you. They recognize how much respect you give it and how much commitment you give it. So even if, no matter how much money somebody has or whatever, so many people think they can buy or get an opportunity if they just go about it the right way. With something like this, it's a whole different game. You have to be patient and you have to really invest a lot in it.
Yeah, and I think it's that cliche, isn't it? You know, when the time's right, the teacher appears. And I think going back to something as well, we've talked quite a lot recently on my meditation group we talk about mindfulness, mindful listening, mindful communication. You know, mindful communication, you know, whether we know it or not, you know, the person that could have the biggest impact on your life may be watching you now.
Absolutely.
And often will be the case in one respect or another. So, you know, and I spoke to somebody not that long ago about going, just be aware that what you say and what you share will have an impact on your future, whether you know it, whether you'll ever know it. It does and it will. And I think what you're saying there is right. You know, the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we conduct ourselves, we have to be mindful that whether it's the guy in the street that you walk past or smile at, or the meeting that you have, whatever it may be, the biggest things that have led to where I am today have never been orchestrated. Just to go back to what we talked about earlier, and that takes. You know, it does take patience to know, well, you're going to go out the door today and you're going to have to you're going to have to be aware of the way you conduct yourself. Not like people are going to conduct themselves badly, but sometimes it's just an act of kindness. Sometimes it's this that could change the course. And these things have changed the course of my life. I mean, they're not the only things that have. I don't want to do my wife an injustice because, you know, in all honesty, you know, of course she has. Because
you best give her a bit of a shout out, Mike.
Yeah, there's plenty more, mate. I've got a piece of paper in my pocket. Hold on, no. She knows all of it.
You're right.
But you know, this is what I mean. I don't want, because we're talking about this, to think this is just about me and my teachers, because there's a whole lot of people behind the scenes that support us in different ways that, you know, I would never want to not give the.
But it comes back to what you said about the holistics, because very, very, very few things, opportunities, anything like happen in isolation. People go, oh God, that one thing happened once upon a time and then all this happened. Yeah, but that one thing probably happened because, like you say there, awareness. This massive collection of life principles, behaviors, habits, the way you're conducting yourself, the way you're communicating, your mindfulness, your self-awareness, have all, you know, compounded in this synergy of situation between how you presented yourself, how you listened, how you reacted, your behavior, your habits, your posture. All of that became that moment. It didn't just happen bang on its own in isolation.
No, and it's that interconnectedness. And the thing is, isn't it, the interesting thing is you go, when you draw that back, keep going back, keep going back, where do you get to?
Yeah.
You know,
who was it who said about connecting the dots, going backwards? It was, I think it was the guy that created Apple. I can't remember his name. Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
He speaks about on one of his great speeches from university in America, talks about connecting the dots. You can't connect the dots forwards. You can't go, I'll do this and I'll do that, because it's just never going to work. But then when you look back, it's so much easier to connect the dots looking backwards, because you go, wow, all of those things, if I hadn't gone there, if I hadn't done this, if I hadn't done that, very, very few of things will have been conscious at the time, but it all led through that destination. Yeah.
And it's interesting, you think that I can't pinpoint. I can tell you that I met Kevin Franklin at Senni 2012, and I met Andy Norman when we get onto that. I can't, then I can tell you how I first met Anthony Pillage. That meant I ended up going to Anthony Pillage, and then we can work back and say, but the only reason I got into Anthony Pillage because I did this. And when by the time you get back and you go, so what really was that? Now we talk about that show being a pivotal point, but you work it back, you go,
you know what, I want to use your wife as an example for a second, because these are great examples. You never know when you fall in love. You never know. And there's room with me on this, because people go, when did it happen? Did it happen in the first week? Did it happen the first day? You're not sure, but after a year, 2 years, 3 years, at some point you go, you just wake up and you're in love. You go, I'm just in love. I don't know, when did it happen? Was it the way I spoke to them? Was it the way I saw them? Was it because I went to that party because I smiled in this certain way? It was no one thing. You didn't do one thing that got your wife, that got your husband, that got your partner. It was 1,000 things. It was the way you looked at them, the way you listened, the way you touched, the thing you did, the thing you dressed, the thing you wore, your posture, your expression, your passion. It was all of these things. No one thing did it. It was all of those things. And then one day you woke up and went, that's it, we're in love. I don't know when it happened, I don't know how it happened, but connecting the dots going backwards, all of it led to that.
And then your entire life led to you being at that point in that moment in time as you walked past.
There you go. There you go.
Anyway, lost for a minute then.
Now you mentioned Anthony Pillage.
Yeah.
Now, Pete won't know Anthony.
No idea who he is.
But in the martial arts world, he was a massive, massive name, and unfortunately, we lost him not so long ago. But I'll pass over to you, Mikey, because you were very close to him.
Yeah.
Just speak to us about him. Who was he? For those listening, that who is that person? What is that name?
Where do you start? If anybody's listening to this that knows Anthony Pillage will know I've just been asked an impossible question to start. Tell me about where do you start with Anthony Pillage? I'll try and be as...
He was a character.
He was a larger than life character in the martial arts. He was a pressure points instructor. That was his kind of niche.
That's how I met him. I went on his course and did the pressure point course, and I had him here. He'd done 3 or 4 seminars. But what I loved about Anthony Pillage when I first met him, or when I first met him in the centre teaching, is just his language. One, he was a very, very clever person.
Yeah,
it sounds ridiculous, but he was the first person that I heard swear on the mats.
Yeah,
really.
How he did it was so creative, colourful, and it just drawn everyone in. It was, to be in his presence, it was amazing, wasn't it? You just have such a good time.
I mean, it's for guys listening that have no idea this guy we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who was 6'4", who drove a Hummer and would regularly fill it up in a striped onesie with a furry hat on. I mean, you can't pin Anthony Pillage down. Describe Anthony Pillage. You go, well, but he was great. He was very eccentric. He was very good at what he did, which was cause people pain. A lot of pain.
Based in Coventry, the spiritual warrior.
Yeah. And this is the thing, he had probably the biggest martial arts centre I've ever known. This size, massive, in the centre of Coventry. And one thing he really taught me, personally by telling me, but also just by his demeanour, and he was who he was, and it worked. He didn't have to conform. He didn't. He was the opposite. He was an anti-conformist. But he made a professional martial arts school work just being completely off the wall.
Being himself.
And just being himself, and we're in an industry, really, which is it's the paradox with the martial arts, because it's like, the martial arts allows us to study ourselves, but what happens because of, uniformity, we're human beings, we like to belong, we like to be part of something, of course we do.
Yeah. It's society in general.
But
we want people to conform. Which box do you fit in? Tell me where to put you. Where do you conform to?
Yeah, but and martial arts is just another avenue for that. But, you will not, again, in our lifetime, find another Anthony Pillage.
You won't.
And yet,
I think he changed martial arts as well, because before he came big on the scene, a lot of martial artists didn't really want to mix with each other, did they?
No.
I believe it was Pillage himself who brought everyone together.
He could hold a room together, whether it's the awards or at a seminar, with people that just would not mix together.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing I loved about him and his centre was that, his students were, if people were different or
it was celebrated.
Absolutely, or quirky. It was like, you're in. Come on, we're gonna have a great time together. And
I always say that to people. I say, you're a freak. You're one of my people.
Yeah,
I love you.
And again, that's not to be to sound condescending to any of those guys, because it was just great, and you just go into that environment and just think, wow, this is living, And we did martial arts, and some days I'd drive and see him, and we'd be doing, firing blow darts using a blow pen into a picture of Gene Hunt on his wall, and then, we just did crazy stuff.
I just remembered a story. He was coming down here to do a seminar, and I think I texted him just to say, just make sure everything's still okay, and he FaceTimed me back. I can't remember who it was with now. I might get the name wrong, but I think it was John Hamill.
Yeah.
And they were both, I'm not going to say naked, but they were both. Yeah. They rang me from a hotel room, both of them topless, on a FaceTime call, just to tell me that I'll be at the seminar.
It was Seni 2016. I'm sure it was.
That was a story.
Yeah. Oh, there's many stories, and the majority of which I can't tell on here. But he was just great. He really lived his life, and right to the end, he never conformed once, and I think it's a great lesson for us. Both within the martial arts, but without it, it's like you can just be who you want, and it can work.
Yeah,
they're the happiest and most content people.
Yeah, and like you say, it's to be celebrated. Being different, or just which is by nature itself being ourselves.
Yeah,
we look at how things have shifted, and ultimately, people think they're being independent. And again, that's not to be critical of people, but somewhere there's a source that says that we should look like that. And once you strip it back, go work the dots back.
Yeah.
There's somebody, and I'm not saying it's a big corporate hand that's manipulating everything. Yep. It's the way of the world.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, and even in something that is conformist in its nature, I think a style, we conform to a style. We might conform to a certain rules within a style, or we wear certain clothes. And he just kicked all that. He'd just wear a pink gi and just get away with it. You'd be on a seminar with, you'd have some of the country's greatest martial arts.
It was also, I remember he's one of the first ones to bring all the big names to the UK as well.
Yeah.
Because I remember I went to his place for a seminar with HAIX Gracie.
Yeah.
And probably one of the biggest names through comedy, if you like, was Master Ken.
Yeah. Well,
have you heard of Master Ken?
No.
Well, I'm going to have to show you something after this.
Well, here's this. If you were to sum Anthony Pillage up in one sentence, so this is the truth. I don't know if you know this. So I think you probably do. But Anthony Pillage had HAIX Gracie, who's one of the most.
I know HAIX Gracie.
Yeah, one of the most. It was the UFC pioneer in the UFC and of jiu-jitsu, and Master Ken in seminars in his dojo on the same day, and them all doing the thrust of freedom.
Yes. That's
now
great.
There is no other single person on this planet that could have made that happen but Anthony Pillage. HAIX Gracie, Master Ken doing the thrust of freedom. I think that was he went to his grave having done something that I don't think he could ever do again. Amongst other things.
And Pete, I'll show you what the thrust of freedom is.
I know.
I'm
especially curious about
that. If you're the thrust bit and you're halfway there, but just and again, one of the UFC really the early UFC legend, Master Ken in a red gear. I mean, just brilliant. But there's lots of stories. It was very kind to me. Anthony Pillage gave me a lot of opportunity.
How did we lose him?
Cancer. Yeah, he died on Christmas Day.
Just gone.
The previous, because he would, because
a lot would say he meant to do that.
If he would have,
How old was he?
54.
Mid
young,
50s,
still very young.
Yeah, he was still young. Yeah, he battled really hard.
Very, very hard. I mean, he did stuff that no one else would really.
Yeah.
Because he tried everything, didn't he?
He did all the alternative stuff. Yeah, he really did.
Refused chemo for a long time and tried every single.
Yeah. And he did it his way. I remember me and Eddie Quinn used to go over periodically, and we'd go and see him. And he says to us, I think he said to us, which route do I take? Not like that we were going to be his design answer, of course, but the only route was ever going to be the Anthony Pillage route. Whatever route, because if it was the route he didn't choose, and it's like if whatever happens, it's got to be whatever way, it has to be your way. And I remember that day. Eddie used to drive a Merc, quite a nice new Merc, and we sat in the in Pillage's dojo, and it was very solemn because I think he might have even just told us that he had cancer. So, it was quite an emotional one, and we could hear this. What's that noise? Anyway, Pillage had a big sign put up on, that palisade fencing he's got outside, and he hadn't put the thing on properly, and it was all the time we're in there, it was banging on the side of Eddie's Merc. So he's got this Merc, and you kind of come up, and we walked out, and he just looked at his car, it was all scratched up the side, and he looked at me, and we just laughed, because it's like, it was just one of those moments where we've just come out, and it was like, what can you do, Ed? He's got. It was just really mixed up. Just tons of memories. He was a great guy. What a very unique man.
Yeah, very privileged to meet him. Speaking of earlier, you mentioned franchises. You was on about taking the Strike Cube. What do we call it? Strike Cube.
Powercube.
What did you call it before?
Strike Mate.
Strike Mate. See, I put the two together, then got a little bit.
My mum calls it Strike Cube.
But you're on about potentially maybe franchising that.
Yeah, but my vision, or our collective vision with it, is to one of the things we've always struggled with is maximising the technology and getting. We talked about the coaching, in fact, enhancing people's technique, accelerating, and it does. We could really accelerate the industry with regards to introducing accurate measurement and as a coaching tool. So what we're working on doing is really packaging it with a full set of processes beginning to end, and it's a great business model. You can plug it into an existing business, you can do personal training with it. It's a very valuable service. However we go about it, whether it's a franchise, but that package, that start to finish,
because people need to know how they can utilize it. How can I implement it?
Exactly.
Like any other piece of fitness equipment or martial arts equipment, it might look fantastic, but unless you can demonstrate its value to me and give me that structure to how I can implement. I want it, but I don't know what to do with it. And if you can deliver that as an entire package.
So your expansion model, if you like, it may not be quite ready yet, but there's going to be a lot of martial artists listening to this, and they might be thinking, do you know what, I might be interested. Can they contact you now?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, we've got that Powercube website, www.powercube.net. We've got a Facebook page that's people can directly contact us. But that's the thing, putting it into a package where, and also for us, we want people to use it well. We want people to gain the maximum,
to really leverage it, not to have it as a gimmick in the gym,
exactly.
To see the value in it and to actually get something out of it, and the best to be able to use it as a tool with their students.
Yeah, the best way to do that is to give people everything they need. The software is fantastic, but physical processes, coaching, coaching toolkits, and again, it's a great plug-in business. Where you can perform really cool, unique, chargeable services with it. So that's where we want to go with it, because it's an incredibly valuable piece of kit. So we want to retain that.
Now this is an interesting one. You're here with us today, Mikey, and you're on the number one podcast in the world.
Obviously, of course.
Obviously,
undiscovered as yet. But
it leads me on to my next question. You met Joe Rogan.
I did meet Joe Rogan, yeah.
So talk to me about that. That's something I'm really intrigued with. I mean, he's a very interesting guy, isn't he?
Because he's right up there with us, isn't he? I mean, he's almost...
It's one of those things, isn't it, where and I have somebody to thank for this, actually. I can't think what the guy's name is, but it was just somebody who used to contact me periodically via social media and say, how's the Powercube going? So it was a couple of years ago, probably a couple of years ago, that it all kind of came to fruition. So this guy messaged me saying, what you should, they should have this on the Joe Rogan show. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
And this is coming back to some of the stuff we discussed, right? You can try, like, for me, it's like, one, it's not like, don't try too hard, but at the same time, it's like, right, if we're going to get this there, how are we going to get it there? And I love that challenge, it's guerrilla tactics as well.
Oh, yeah,
because you go,
absolutely.
We ain't got a budget, right?
Yeah.
But we've got to get this to the UFC Performance Institute. We got it there. We've got to get this. We've got this to some cool places, but we're going to get this to the Joe Rogan podcast studio, right? We ain't got budget for it. Yeah. We've got to get it there. That's what I love. I love that challenge, and just be with a bit of guile. So anyway, and it was pretty simple. I'm saying that there wasn't
sheer grit, really, isn't it? Just sheer grit,
and it's just a bit of luck in it. So. And then again, you go, well, how'd you do that? So I just copied his studio manager Jamie in a tweet, said, "Hey guys, how about having at the studio?" 3 days went by, and I was just like, I'm chancing this. I'm sure people tag him in stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And that's that, because for years, probably 6 years, I used to sit. I never got paid for the Powercube or the Strike Mate stuff. I used to do it at night when the missus had gone to bed. So I'd work in the day, I'd teach, and then I'd sit at night, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night, just doing all my bits. And I sat up about 12 o'clock, and it just came up, Twitter notification. Let's do it. Boom! Out of nowhere, like, I just got completely.
Did the whole house
cold,
wake up then?
Completely gone cold. It was like, it was just a random thing. It was like 3 or 4 days later. So it was like, let's do it. So it was like straight on, like 30 seconds. He got a message back. How can I contact you? Next minute, I've got his email. Within about, not joking, with about 90 seconds, the 2 messages had gone. He got an email, and it was on. It was, we started the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we just have to go down the route then of finding out how we're going to finance it. But you don't worry about stuff like that. You go, guys, if we can get this kit to Joe Rogan's, we're going to get the money from somewhere. I will get that money from somewhere. We'll work the logistics out. Some of this stuff's got to happen. And I remember putting it to people, and somebody just said, "You can get it where?" Well, he crossed his legs and says, "Well, we've got to do it then, haven't we?" So anyway, long story. So I'm trying to think. Well, I think it was February 2018. Maybe it was. Maybe it was 19. Please excuse the dates. So we organised to get the kit over there. So we flew the kit over in the world's biggest box. I'm not joking. That box was as big as that gym mat there.
Really?
And like this. And I'm going, Christ almighty, like, whose box this? It was like a freight container. I was like, surely there's one piece of kit in here. Anyway,
this feels unnecessary.
So we went to LA. So I've been quite fortunate. I've been to LA a couple of times. So we went to LA. Where did we go first? So we went.
I remember while you were there, you sent me over some photos.
Yeah, I
was buzzing.
Where's he? We went to the UFC Performance Institute. So the trip we went. I mean, this is a cool trip. This was one trip. This was like 7 days. So we went to the UFC Performance Institute.
Which is like the mecca for some people to get there.
I mean, it's cool. We've installed our first kit there. That's another story. Before it opened, and
wow,
that's cool. I've had a lot of times I visited the centre. So we went to the UFC Performance Institute, then we flew on from Vegas to LA. It's all work, This is where you get punched 4,000 times in a weekend, then you get to do the good bits, do you know what I mean? So then we flew on to LA, and we were arranged to go to the Joe Rogan podcast studio, Joe Rogan Experience podcast studio. So we turned up, and we were met by the studio manager, Jeff Holmes, who's just a great. I mean, a big shout out to Jeff. He's just a really cool guy. Invited us in. We had the run of the place for a few hours before Joe even turned up. And I mean, the place is just like a 3,000 square foot man cave.
Is it?
It's like this kind of size.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, it's massive. There's, he's got his full.
He has all got gadgets and stuff and toys, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's got like his gym. He's full. It was brand spanking new gym, the mats and all that, all branded.
Oh, this is all inside his podcast studio.
Yeah,
He's got his
There are videos on there that you can find, and there's like a little tour of it, because the amount of times they refer to stuff, like obviously I turned up today and so and so was training, and so turned up. The guest that he's got in, because guests don't realise when they arrive there, there's so much cool stuff that sponsors have given him, or Powercube, and he's experienced, and like it's like a man cave.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the bit we put it in is this kind of size. There's some like classic cars in there, and then he's got an archery little range. And
nice.
Yeah, it was cool. So we spent a few hours hanging out.
High-fiving and testosterone beefing and
yeah, just thinking this is quite cool. And then Joe turned up with Brendan Shaw, because they were doing a podcast. So we didn't spend too much time with Joe, but it was. The whole thing was.
It's definitely a story, Mike. It's definitely a story.
It was just cool,
Yeah. And it widens your perspective as well. It widens your bubble. Do you know what I mean? Living in the UK, living in Leicestershire, whatever. People forget how big the world is and how those things are within reach. Do you know what I mean?
And this is the thing, and it's not me saying. I'm not going to say that. It's the LinkedIn classic entrepreneur thing. You go, we just blagged it. I don't mean that in a negative way. We just hustled.
Everybody blags it.
But why? Because then we just do stuff that's cool. We've done stuff that's cool, and that's all it is. These guys are just people. And when
they're all just people.
When you see people in their own environment, you realise people are people, and we can travel across the world. We went to Hollywood, so on that one trip, we started at the UFC Performance Institute, went to the Joe Rogan Experience, and then we went to a gym in Sunset Boulevard called Unbreakable Performance. And it's like, we didn't really know until we were there quite what a place it was. But
I mean, on Sunset Boulevard, it's going to be no joke. There's going to be the best of the best. There's something going on there.
It's where we later found out, and when we got there, we realised what kind of gym it is. $2,000 a month membership.
Wow.
But I've been talking to one of the co-owners, a guy called Craig Lee, again, lovely guy, for a couple of years, and we'd been bouncing to and from. And this is the thing that we're coming back to.
So people go, how do you get that opportunity? When did it start? It was a collection of interactions. Yeah. It was no one thing. It was the demonstration that I'd invested in that relationship with no expectation.
It wasn't
that nothing was going to come back.
No.
He wasn't going to pay me. He wasn't going to need it. There was no expectation. But then he knew who I was. So when the opportunity came, I was straight in there. And
we just said, hey, sent him a message for, said, hey, Craig, we're going to be out in LA. We're coming to take the unit to this Joe Rogan podcast. It'd be great to pop in and see you and show you the kit. We're going to have the kit with us. We'll come and give you a bit of demo. He said, oh yeah, that's great. Well, you can come in the morning. We just kind of have free run of the place. So we walk in to find it on Sunset Boulevard. It's the gym itself is above this restaurant called the Pink Taco, right? Which is just a pink restaurant, right? And you think it was like this high-end gym. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you kind of go around the corner and through these fire doors. And the first person walked in, my mate Scott. And as I walked in, I was turning around. I said, it's that bloke from Scrubs. I used to love Scrubs. You know the thing?
Yeah.
One of the lead actors from that. So this is the guy from Scrubs. Anyway, it turns out really that, it's like A-list Central. So we were in there, and I've got some cool footage. And we didn't really, whether it's big names or anybody, it's like, I didn't really know who people are.
Yeah.
But we were there all day, and anybody that came in, hey guys, you got to go on this kit, and they were just cool.
So it's like an A-list conveyor belt. This gym,
it's massively. No, that's exactly what it. That's what it is.
Double takes all that.
So we got.
Pete, look.
Yeah, it was great. So we got Wiz Khalifa on the Powercube. So I got him kicking me. Nice. And then we didn't really know who he was. But the interesting thing is, again, coming back to this thing, just to see people in their own environment, and that gym prides itself on being like a sanctuary for people. It's like a refuge where
I suppose where they can let their hair down as well.
Where they just go and be normal people, because that's exactly what they are. Mm-hmm. But you see there's lots of big names. Chris Pratt, they all train in there, and it's like kind of community.
Yeah,
where
very exclusive, very protected.
Yeah,
they can relax and be themselves. Not self-conscious about their position in the world.
And we were there all day, and we just had loads of fun. It was just great. And there was a girl brought a birthday cake in, and I said to Scott, I recognise her. Demi Lovato. And it's like it doesn't. But it's just madness. Where not that I place more value on these people than anybody else, but you just think, it's cool. We did the UFC Performance Institute, Joe Rogan, and Unbreakable Performance in a week, and you go, and how did we get there? And it was like there was nothing corporate about it. It was all just those, just building those.
And now you're on the podcast with Rich and Pete.
Hey, bro. Where do I go from here?
Go on, Mikey.
As you keep raising the bar.
Where do I go from here?
Oh, Jesus.
But it's just, and that's what it is. It's cool, But I've done a few of those, but I don't hold any of them in. Like I say, I don't think it makes me any better. It's just you can't go. But it was cool though.
Do you believe your best is still yet to come in terms of richness and experience? Not as wealth or anything like that, but I mean, have you don't seem the type to have ever given up chasing your curiosity?
No, well, I just don't give up.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like we just keep going day by day. Like I set massive expectations at periods in my life, and never met them, and got disappointed time and time again. And I thought it was other people, and I've now again we look at reflect on things and realise that it was always us and our own expectations that weren't met. And like nowadays, it's like I just enjoy it, And we'll do some more cool stuff. I'm sure we will, but I do cool stuff every day with my kids and my wife and my teachers, and we can go to. One of the real important things is, we can go to Hollywood, but it's always much better when you come home. Do you know what I mean? And that's the thing. Don't put your expectations and your dreams elsewhere, because they're never elsewhere.
No.
And you realise when you come back, that's the most important bit, and that's the truth.
Beautiful.
And on that note, I think we're going to finish there. So thank you very much for coming on, Market. It's been amazing.
Gents.
What a story.
Been emotional, brother.
Absolute pleasure, boys.
5 minutes. Soon goes.
About halfway in.
Thanks for checking out the Firefighters Podcast this week. Make sure you check out the YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram pages, keeping yourself up to date with the latest podcast as it comes out. We'll see you guys soon.